Our speakers for today, Dr. Vidotma Kunjal and Dr. Betty Govindain have joined us. We welcome you all, ma'am. Thank
Thank
you for
you.
joining us this afternoon, and we are very eager to listen to your deliberations. So, in this next session of the Mahatma Gandhi lecture series to celebrate the life and legacy of the Mahatma Gandhi and we finding the connect. Uh, First of all, at the outset, I'd like to express our gratitude and thanks to our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Sri Prakash Mani Tripathi, sir, who has given us this opportunity to conduct such a amazing lecture series. Further, I would like to extend thanks to the coordinator of IRD, Professor Naveen Sharma, Professor B.N. Tripathi, who is DSW IGNTU, my colleague Dr. Abhishek Bansal, all the participants who have joined us and are very eager to listen to our sessions. Each time we get very overwhelmingly responses from them. Let me give a very brief introduction of our speakers today, and then I shall uh, commence this session for today. Our first speaker for the day is Dr. Vidotma Kunjalji. She is director at Mahatma Gandhi Institute, Mocha, Mauritius. She did MBA from the University of Wales, University of Manchester, and doctorate in business administration from Leeds Beckett University, UK, and in leadership from the Princeton University, USA. A board member in Pravasi Ghat Trust Fund and Lebanon Heritage Trust Fund. Prior to MGI, she worked as secretary at the PSSA, assistant manager at the Industrial and Vocational Training Board, and secretary of the Small and Medium Industries Development Organization. Her fields of interest include leadership management, Hindi studies, philosophy, and Sanskrit. Ma'am will today speak on Gandhiji in Mauritius, visit, influences, and legacy. We welcome you, ma'am.
Thank
The
you,
next,
Dr. Vikram Prasad. Please.
the next speaker for today is Dr. Betty Govindain. She is a retired academic affiliated to the University of KwaZulu-Natal, South Africa. She has authored several books, A Time of Memory, Reflections on Recent South African Writing, Sister Outsiders, The Representation of Identity and Difference in Selected Writings by South African Indian Women, Words on Water, Reflections on Recent South African Writing, and 1913, Satyagraha Resistance and its Legacy. Her works have won Hidden Cube Award and UNISA Press Book Prize. Dr. Govindain will speak on Gandhi and the poetry of the soul. We extend warm welcome to you, ma'am. To begin with, may I request Dr. Vidotma Kunjalji to begin her deliberations. Before that, I'd request all the participants to please mute their mics and post your queries in the chat box. I shall be posting them over to ma'am after her lecture. Ma'am, please.
Thank you, Dr. Vikram Prasad Singh. Good afternoon and namaste from Mauritius. Mauritius से मेरा प्रणाम आप सबको. My lecture will be in English and I'll start straight away. But prior to that, I wish to acknowledge the Vice Chancellor of Professor Sri Prakash Mani Tripathi from Indira Gandhi National Tribal University, Professor Naveen Sharma, and Dr. Vikram Pratap Singh himself, faculty members from Indira Gandhi National Tribal University and students, colleagues from Mahatma Gandhi Institute and students. Good afternoon and namaste once again. First of all, I would like to thank you and to thank the university, especially Professor Naveen Sharma and Professor Sri Prakash Mani Tripathi, the Vice Chancellor of this university, for inviting me and for giving me this golden opportunity to deliver this lecture on Gandhi today. I would like to seize this opportunity to commend the effort of academics, management, and students of this university who have joined the world to commemorate and celebrate the legacy of the great Mahatma Gandhi. I wish to congratulate your university for this laudable initiative. I understand that the Indira Gandhi National Tribal University was set up in 2007 and is leading ahead to fulfill its objectives and mission in connection with the propagation of cultural traditions and also to provide higher education and research facilities to the tribal population of India. Allow me to say that I find it very Ghandian in essence. The title on which I propose to share certain ideas with you is entitled Gandhi in Mauritius, Visit, Influences and Legacy. For those who do not have much idea of Mauritius, it is a small island nation in the Indian Ocean region with a democratic government of 1.3 million people of diverse cultures and religion. More than 60% of the population have Indian roots. I would say it is a vibrant part of Indian diaspora. The lecture is divided mainly into two parts. The first part will deal with the short visit and interaction of Mahatma Gandhi in Mauritius. I shall bring forth certain historical facts, along with the spirit of constructionism that Gandhiji left to empower Indo-Mauritians under the British colony. And the second part will deal with the impact, influences, and legacy of Gandhiji, particularly in both pre- and post-independence of Mauritius. So I'll start with Gandhiji's visit. The fortuitous visit of Mahatma Gandhi to Mauritius took place in 1901, a crucial period of Mauritian history for various reasons. Firstly, as I mentioned earlier, Gandhiji touched the Mauritian soil in 1901. Secondly, in January of that year, the general election was to take place in the country, and in those days, election was organized each and every day in a district. The same year, Queen Victoria passed away. No one knew at that time that after his return from Mauritius, Gandhiji would emerge as the greatest spiritual leader of the world. His visit in 1901 is termed as fortuitous because no one really knew about his journey to Mauritius as it was not pre-planned. But contrary to this, the arrival of SS Naushera, the steamer, was scheduled. In his autobiography, he said, "So I sailed for home. Mauritius was one of the ports of call, and as the boat made a long halt there, I went ashore and acquainted myself fairly well with local conditions. For one night, I was the guest of Sir Charles Bruce, the governor of the colony. He was a guest of Mr. Ahmed Ghulam Mohammed, a Muslim trader in Port Louis at that time, and he paid a visit to the Supreme Court of Mauritius on 5th of November in the company of Mr. Henry Bertin, a leading attorney who introduced him to members of the bar. On 9th November, Gandhi was invited by Sir Charles Bruce, the then government of Mauritius, to Le Château de Réduit to participate in a banquet given on the 60th birth of King Edward VII. On 13th of November, the Muslim traders gave a banquet in honor of Mahatma Gandhi at Taherbagh in Mauritius, and Mr. Gandhi, the Indian barrister who has made a name for himself at Natal in South Africa, delivered a very important speech at a dinner which was given to him the other day by the Indian Mohammedans. Several European gentlemen were present, and Mr. Gandhi spoke in English and in Gujarati. He said that he had the pleasure to find himself in such distinguished company. The Indians in Mauritius are the principal laborers of this country, which owed its prosperity to the patient labor and great endurance. He said that the Indians should engage with politics because it was their right and their duty, but they had to do it properly. In a speech, he admonished his countrymen to give prompt attention to the education of their children, which would act as the most important tool for socio-economic development. Following his departure, Gandhiji sent Sri Manilal Mangalal Doctor to Mauritius, popularly known as Dr. Manilal, an Indian lawyer who played a crucial role in the struggle of the island's indentured and non-indentured workers, as well as of the Indo-Mauritians for their social, political, and economic rights. Through his actions, he helped to forge a collective consciousness among them, and his brief stay in Mauritius has had a long-lasting impact on 20th century Mauritian history. Between 1907 and 1911, Manilal Doctor undertook numerous activities to highlight and help to alleviate the terrible plight of the island's Indo-Mauritians, the indentured and non-indentured workers. And in 1907, when he presented himself at the Supreme Court in order to take the permission to practice law in Mauritius, Manilal refused to remove his turban in court, just as Gandhi had done in 1890s in South Africa. Doctor provided free medical advice in cases where indentured workers and former indentured workers were being persecuted and ill-treated by the employees. During this period, Manilal Doctor traveled through all of the island's villages and held dozens of meetings with the sugar state workers and small workers in order to make them aware of the economic, social, and political issues which affected their daily lives. His actions helped to shape the consciousness of Indian workers and small planters. Manilal Doctor also played a central role in the establishment of the Arya Samaj movement in Mauritius. In addition, he founded the Young Men's Hindu Association with the objective of organizing the island's young Hindus in order for them to know their rights, undertake community action, and help the poor, such as indentured laborers. In 1911, Manilal Doctor left Mauritius for India. Now I'll move towards the impact and influences and legacy, especially during the pre-independence period, prior to 1968. In fact, the impact of Mahatma Gandhi on the Indian community of Mauritius was not only due to his visit to Mauritius in 1901, but also due to the activities carried out in connection with him several years later. Since 1920s, Mahatma Gandhi had played a prominent role in the struggle for the independence of India. And from 1920 to 1948, Gandhi's every political activity, his social moves, were fully published in the local press, marching on the way to Gandhism. Gandhiji's movement was launched in India since 1920s of this century. From that period onwards, brief life sketches of Mahatma Gandhi, Nehruji, Lala Lajpat Rai, and so on, the famous Indian freedom fighters, were being published in Mauritian dailies. Such live sketches were being published in Mauritian Indian Times, and in later years, every aspect of India's struggle for independence was published in Mauritian Mitra, Mauritian Arya Pratika, Mauritian Arya Veer and Jagriti. These were all newspapers. Before Indian independence, there were separate columns for India News in Hindi weeklies of Mauritius, in which the activities of Mahatma Gandhi were given wide currency. Impressed by Mahatma Gandhi, Pandit Sahadev, a renowned Mauritian patriot, adopted the Gandhi topi, that is the cap, and the khadi, crude and handmade cloth. The same Pandit Sahadev later on founded the Gandhi Khadi Ashram of Vakwa in Mauritius. Mahatma Gandhi was not an enemy to the Englishmen. On the 30th of January 1948, he was assassinated, and when Mauritians were veiled with the mournful shroud, when Frank Wilson, a British Mauritian poet, wrote a poem soaked in emotion and paid tribute to the great Mahatma. From then onwards, Ghandian literature was in vogue among Mauritian people, and his beloved song, Raghupati Raghava Rajaram Patita Pavana Sitaram, reverberated. Professor Basudeb Bisundayal, an ardent follower of Gandhi, gave Gandhism a new direction and worked for the emancipation of the downtrodden Indo-Mauritians to help in giving them the right to vote by developing literacy among them. Now I'll move towards the post-independence period, that is after 1968. Sir Sivsagar Ramgoolam, the father of the nation, achieved independence for Mauritius on 12th of March 1968. When he was asked to choose a specific date for independence, he opted for the Salt March, a historic event and day in memory of Mahatma Gandhi's greatest political move. Furthermore, there were Gandhi Bhavan at L'Aventure and the Gandhi Ashram at Vakwa, which I mentioned earlier, where Gandhi's birthdays are commemorated every year. The government of Sir Sivsagar Ramgoolam had encouraged the local government, which allowed the district and village councils, as well as municipalities, to name streets, roads, squares, and gardens bearing the name of Mahatma Gandhi, and today dozens of such places can be located in Mauritius. Moreover, in order to propagate Gandhi's philosophy, Sir Sivsagar Ramgoolam created the Mahatma Gandhi Institute with the help of Srimati Indira Gandhi, the then Prime Minister of India in 1970, after a joint venture between the government of India and the government of Mauritius. The institute is operational in Mocha since 1975, and its premises there is a life-size statue of Mahatma Gandhi. Every year, on 2nd of October, special ceremony, the Gandhi IGNTU is organized in a very grand manner, and the statue is garlanded, followed by a memorial lecture on Gandhi's philosophy given by eminent local or foreign dignitaries. The Mahatma Gandhi Institute has a mandate in the preservation and dissemination of Ghandian values. On the 3rd June 1970, when the foundation stone was laid by Srimati Indira Gandhi, she laid stress in her speech on the fact that the Mahatma Gandhi Institute was intended to promote the study of the cultures of various areas, including that of India. She went on to say that the culture of India did not belong to any one religion or any one particular group or any one religion or one region, referring to the various streams which in this island go to form the Mauritian culture. She expressed the hope that these would help the land to blossom and to contribute to the world culture and the richness of the world community. I would like now to give a brief account here of the Mahatma Gandhi Institute and how it is committed to preserve and promote Ghandian values and principles. The Mahatma Gandhi Institute was established by an Act of Parliament in 1970 with the following objects. That is, the first one, to establish as a tribute to Mahatma Gandhi a center of studies of Indian culture and traditions, to promote education and culture generally. Today, the Mahatma Gandhi Institute operates as a parastatal body under the aegis of the Ministry of Education, Tertiary Education, Science and Technology. Over the years, the Mahatma Gandhi Institute has developed its vision and mission as follows. Vision is to become an internationally recognized degree award institution, excelling in education, research, arts, and culture. Its mission, to provide quality education by modernizing the teaching and learning in Indian studies, performing arts, fine arts, Indological studies, Chinese studies, and Mauritian and area studies. To produce high-quality research cultural programs and artistic works, and to continue to preserve, promote, and disseminate cultural traditions and heritage, and also to continue to promote responsible citizenship as inspired by Ghandian principles and values. In order to attain its objects, the Mahatma Gandhi Institute has set up 5 tertiary schools and 7 secondary schools, including the Ghandian Basic School. The tertiary schools run the diplomas, degrees, and postgraduate degree programs in Indian studies, performing arts, fine arts, Indological studies, Mauritian and area studies, and Chinese studies. There are 5 tertiary schools: the School of Performing Arts, the School of Indian Studies, the School of Mauritian and area studies, the School of Fine Arts, and the School of Indological Studies. We have, as mentioned earlier, 6 secondary schools. The Mahatma Gandhi Institute Secondary School is located in the rural area of Mocha in Mauritius. The Mahatma Gandhi Institute Secondary School was founded in 1976 under the parastatal body, the MGI, and the MGI Secondary School is one of the 7 secondary schools in the system of MGI and OTI system. It is funded by the state and managed by the Mahatma Gandhi Institute. Among those 7 schools, we have the Ghandian Basic School. This school, basically, its establishment was set up to inculcate the principles of basic education as enunciated by Mahatma Gandhi to students who were left out of mainstream education system after the Certificate of Primary Education examination at that time. The school was inaugurated on the 2nd of October 1984 to mark the 115th birth anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi. The objectives of the school were mainly to provide an alternative model of education and emphasizes literacy, social education, and practical programs of education revolving around handicraft, music, and games. Secondly, to equip the child with a measure of trainability so that he may smoothly enter apprenticeship and thus fend for himself as an adult. Third, to build up the child's self-esteem through a positive perception of his innate abilities and capabilities. And fourth, to prepare the child for a responsible citizenship through the acquisition of values and right attitudes. There are many other major activities that are carried out at the Mahatma Gandhi Institute to uphold the Ghandian philosophy and his principles. These include teaching of Ghandian philosophy in our BA programs of study for Indian philosophy. We also have, as mentioned earlier, the celebration of Gandhi Jayanti every year at the Mahatma Gandhi Institute and in all its secondary schools on the 2nd of October. We organize an annual memorial lecture on Mahatma Gandhi every year. We also have the integration of Ghandian values in the school curriculum. We also engage in community service and outreach programs based on Ghandian philosophy, and this is done mainly by students of Mahatma Gandhi Institute, both at secondary level and at tertiary level. There is also a regular compilation of lectures and publications of research papers which are related to Gandhiji. We also mount exhibition in connection with Gandhiji. There is also a dedicated creation and section of Gandhiji in our MGI library. And last year, we had the launching of an official stamp on Gandhiji by the Mauritian Post Office in collaboration with Indian High Commission to celebrate its 150th birth anniversary. Basically, these are mainly our activities that we normally organize in order to pay tribute to Mahatma. As a conclusion, I would conclude to say that we are keeping the values and philosophy of Gandhiji alive, not only for the present generation, but also for the benefit of the coming generation, both in formal and informal ways. Inspired by Gandhian values of universal brotherhood, social equity, peace, and nonviolence, we are aspiring for a better intercultural relation within and stronger international relations. Before ending, I wish to place on record and thank all those who have helped me in mounting this lecture, namely my academic colleagues, the management team, the administrative team, the library team, and the IT team of the Mahatma Gandhi Institute. With this, I thank you for your kind attention. Namaste.
Thanks a lot, ma'am. It was so nice to know that an institute for Mahatma Gandhi in Mauritius. I was unaware of it as of till now. We have one question for you, ma'am. What role you see for Gandhian ideas in highly polarized world?
Can you just repeat it? I didn't hear what you said.
Question is, what role you see
Yeah.
for Gandhian ideas in highly polarized world?
Well, I think the main thing will be the message of peace, right? The message of peace of Gandhi is a very important part. And not only that, I think the message of peace, love, in order to promote the interculturality in the world, is in fact, I would say, prominent and very important. I think that's all I can say as regards to what you've just asked.
Thank you, ma'am. I'd request the participants to keep posting their queries. We shall get back to Dr. Kunjal after even the second speaker ends her deliberation. So thanks a lot, ma'am, for your nice talk and the excellent information. Now may I request Dr. Betty Govindain to present her talk on Gandhi and the poetry of the soul. Dr. Govindain. Welcome, ma'am.
Hello, everybody.
Hello, ma'am.
The Vice Chancellor and Professor Sharma, the Chair, Dr. Singh, all the technical staff who have been so helpful, and my fellow panelists, Dr. Kunjal, thank you for giving such a wonderful picture of what's happening in Mauritius. You are my neighbor. And to all the participants, I'm expecting some friends to join as well from South Africa, and also my brother from England, Jonathan, and his wife, Ghanam. I'm delighted and privileged to join you, and I thank you and the fellow panelists before me for doing this wonderful tribute to Gandhi. I've written, and many others have written in South Africa about the different aspects of Gandhi. And in this particular presentation, I'm focusing on a particular aspect. In this presentation, I shall consider the role of poetry in our political life. Can you see me?
Yes, we can see you.
With reference to the challenges of justice and peace. I shall consider in particular, and most importantly, the role of spinning in the economy of the Satyagrahi's life. I conclude with poems I have composed on Gandhi and on Satyagraha. I begin with a poem, a very interesting poem from India itself. Gandhi, Spinning and Poetry. And this is the poem. One day, a lean poem reached Gandhi's ashram to have a glimpse of the man. Gandhi, spinning away his thread towards Ram, took no notice of the poem waiting at his door, ashamed as he was no bhajan. The poem cleared his throat, and Gandhi looked at him sideways through his glasses that had seen hell. Have you ever spun thread, he asked? Ever pulled a scavenger's cart? Ever stood the smoke of an early morning kitchen? Have you ever starved? The poem said, I was born in the woods, in a hunter's mouth. A fisherman brought me up to this hamlet. Yet I know no work, I only sing. First I sang in the courts, then I was plump and handsome, but am on the streets now, half starved. That's better, Gandhi said, with a sly smile. But you must give up this habit of speaking in Sanskrit at times. Go to the fields. Listen to the peasants' speech. The poem turned into a grain and lay waiting in the fields for the tiller to come and upturn the virgin soil, moist with the new rain. Friends, this poem was composed by Dr. Satya Anandan. It's an excellent translation into English from Malayalam. And in Dr. Satya Anandan's poem, he's from Cochin, Gandhi is engrossed in spinning his thread towards the divine when he receives an unusual visitor, a poem. Gandhi tells the poem to go out into the real world and attune its ear to the sound of the peasants' talk and become something useful, to become grain. From poem to grain. Indeed, it is necessary to see how a poem may change its form and become grain, an agent of change. In South Africa, we are quite familiar with the political role that poets and artists have played in being the conscience of the nation. Many poets sacrificed their lives, died in exile, were imprisoned, suffered, had their words blanked out, were muffled, banned, and silenced. Yet their poetry and art were a stirring witness to the oppressive apartheid state. Our poetry spoke directly to the condition of injustice, oppression, pain, and suffering that was inflicted and endured. It is in this sense that poems are peace activists. Our protest and resistance poetry is alive to the society in which we are entrammelled. Indeed, our poems have long turned into grain. However, the injunction of Gandhi in the poem above, and also to Tagore, remains. Let the poet spin. This is the very poet who was the first to call Gandhi the Mahatma. And nobody was more in tune than Tagore with the interrelated, interconnected world in which we live and which we should create. Indeed, Tagore's poems are prayers, words spun out of the very soul to the Creator. Tagore's prayers are the poetry of the soul. So what then did Gandhi mean? And why spinning? Firstly, spinning is a great leveling activity. Spinning reminds us of our interconnectedness. It reinstates the place of manual work. The physical activity that Gandhi encouraged was spinning. It constitutes a rich and diverse activity. Spinning is a useful, practical activity which leads to the production and creation of cloth. It is an indictment against the mechanization and depersonalization of labor that was our inheritance from the Industrial Revolution. Spinning is a powerful symbolic protest against the colonial enterprise that harvested raw material from the colonies and sent them to be processed in the dark satanic mills of Manchester, in the metropolis. In this, it is similar to the protests that Gandhi led through his salt marches. Without the spinning wheel, there is no Swadeshi. Swadeshi meaning self-sufficiency. If Gandhi's views on spinning were heeded, we would not be experiencing the deepening division between rich and poor, or the dire climate crisis we are in now, 100 years later. Spinning is about slowing down the body to the still point of deep realization of the meaning and purpose of life and living. Spinning is prayer. For Gandhi, spinning is an act of contemplation. And in contemplation, we move towards the divine, the transcendent. But we also move towards the world, to the immanent. Without the spinning wheel, there is no Swaraj, self-rule, in both its narrower individual senses and in its wider national understandings. And indeed, today we want to claim the global meaning of Swaraj, of self-rule. In spinning, Gandhi was dispelling the distinction between the secular and the sacred. Indeed, in spinning, as Gandhi saw it, the political, economic, spiritual, ecological, cultural, and aesthetic are deeply interwoven. They are deeply iterative, the weft and warp of our individual and collective lives, indeed our planetary and cosmic interweaving. And so here from the microcosm, we see how we reach out and connect to the macrocosm and to and fro. Gandhi was hereby reclaiming the unity of self, body, and mind, and positing a new way of knowing and a new way of being. Yes, spinning, anti-heroic, ephemeral, everyday, is yet deeply sacred. Here, work is performed as consecration, as sacrifice. Here, the gift of being occurs in the gift of doing. Finite tasks, such as spinning, begin to take on finite and infinite meanings. This is the training for the Satyagrahi. As Ajay Skaria, our professor who presented a few weeks ago, states cryptically in his book, Unconditional Equality, Satyagrahis must, he says, constantly practice the patience of groundless faith. Vandana Shiva, one of our great contemporary Ghandians, says, in this period of the end of the world, how do we sow the seeds of a possible world? The first, every person should recognize that working with their hands and their hearts and their minds and being interconnected is the highest evolution of our species. Working with our hands is not a degradation. It is our very humanity. This is the radical equality that Gandhi aimed for. It is from the center of the chakra that we spin cloth, spin subsistence, spin justice, spin peace, spin freedom, spin prayers, spin poetry, spin love. It is not surprising that the spinning wheel became the symbol of Indian independence. And the seed, as Vandana Shiva reminds us, is the symbol of our second independence. I'd like to conclude with a section of poems that I have composed, and I've chosen some which deal with the idea of spinning, of grain and soil. And I thought I would like to start for the benefit of all our participants from outside South Africa with a poem I have composed based on a description of Phoenix. This is from Sita Gandhi, a memoir. And as you know, Sita Gandhi was the granddaughter of Mahatma Gandhi. Her father was Manilal Gandhi. Her sister Ela Gandhi continues to work very much in South Africa in many fronts. and is a leading activist historically and at the present time. Well, this is a description of Gandhi's home at Phoenix, and I've entitled the poem Gandhi's Earth, Phoenix at Dawn. And one day, if you visited me in South Africa and in Durban, I will be happy to take you to this ashram. The early morning breaks over the cluster of small white homes shrouded in shadows. A larger home of wood and iron, surrounded by a flower garden, quietly commands the allotment. At the edges of the homestead are large mango trees. In the center, a coconut palm and a Christmas tree. The printing press with its machinery now still will whirl into motion soon. The dogs are rousing while the calves edge closer to their mothers, standing erect with glazed eyes. From this sacred ground, the city is stirring, plotting machinations for the day. Here in this ashram, the rhythms of work and prayer are experiments with truths. And if you know the geography of the city, you'll realize that Phoenix, Gandhi's ashram, is a little outside the central business district. The next poem I'd like to read to you is called Satya. You stand tall and still, clad in loin cloth, stripped bare of pomp and the garlands of adulation. You took command and spoke in clear and simple words, believing in the force of your ideas rather than of a gun. Soul force is not the weapon of the weak, but the weapon of the strong. Soul force when will and heart and body and mind work in unison. Soul force, that alone could prevail against the gates of hell. Fired not with hate for the other, but with love for wholeness and humanity, with the strength to say, enough, we will not be trampled on like dust. We will be free. Another short poem entitled A Heart of Flesh. A heart that is the pulse of progress goes back to the very source of the cosmic music to hear itself beat. The next poem is entitled Savodia. And you know this is based on the parable in the New Testament of the last person appearing on the fields to work being given the same amount as the first person who arrived to work. This was a parable that Jesus had told. Savodia. Unto this last I give the same as unto the first. He who worked from the first hour is equal to he who worked from the 11th. Both meet in the dignity of work and in the dignity of pay. The gift of bread for all is the bequest of peace for the world. And another poem entitled Song of Ascents. And Song of Ascents comes from the Psalms of always rising up. And yet the opposite is true as well of the work with the spinning wheel. It's about being grounded. And so there's the two forces of being rooted and always rising. Song of Ascents. It is not in erudite thoughts, but in the sinews of a spinning wheel. Serving my neighbor, I see truth's cause and freedom's gain. In women's sighs, its liturgy, and widows' tears, an altar for the sacrament of love. The next set of poems are Hind Swaraj poems, and I would like you to also notice the reference to grain there and truth. Hind Swaraj poems. We inherit the cosmos, sky, sea, and hallowed earth to hold in sacred trust. It is not in the state machine, but in self-rule that true Swaraj is found. Not in the gilded wealth of hoard houses, but in the scattering of grain on tilled soil. You and I are stewards of creation, threaded together with love. We find our calling in the dignity of nature and the manifold of work. The bonds are lifted. The pall of violence over each village dissipates. The air is suffused with reverential sighs, imbuing new destiny to the mundane. The state of livelihood is elevated to the stature of holiness, and truth is the force for the good of all. Two more poems. From prison houses degraded and coarsened, the human soul arises to seek justice without faltering, refusing the sacrilege of silence. Post blood on the lintels, mark the foreheads for peace, stave off the anarchy loosened on the world, and nurture a planet for bounty and bread. And finally, as you ply the thread on the spinning wheel, wrapped in contemplation, hands and minds in placable unison, you come to a hospitality of the heart towards yourself and your neighbor. Friends, may Gandhi's very life and those of the innumerable saints, both living and dead, may their lives and their life and their examples and their words turn into grain. And may my words and my poems turn into grain. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, ma'am. It was very nice to know your thoughts in form of these poems. We have a couple of questions. First question is, what is the relevance of Gandhism for the construction of world peace and security in contemporary times?
We see many eruptions and we see many protests continuing. Gandhi's influence continued for the best part of the 20th century in South Africa, through the Defiance campaigns, through the work of the different congresses, the Indian congresses, through the African National Congress, and the underlying message of resistance underlined all the activities. And into the 21st century, we see so many more divisions, and all these protests continue to raise issues of justice. And we cannot have peace, we said in South Africa, without justice and the way we respond to issues of oppression. And so Gandhi's strategies of speaking truth to power is as relevant today as it has ever been in the world.
We have one more question here. In South Africa, as well as in other parts of Africa like Ghana, Gandhi is being viewed as racist. Why so? Was it the failure of academicians to put right things before masses, or simply politicians are to blame?
This is a very important question, and we've had critics in South Africa as well about Gandhi. And we need to understand that, and this is true not only of Gandhi, it's true of all our main leaders in history, and certainly in South Africa, people who were part of the liberation struggle. We need to not see them as frozen biographies or autobiographies. We need to see them as also part of a process of change and development and evolution. Unfortunately, frozen parts of Gandhi. Gandhi himself changed and evolved. And Gandhi's whole philosophy was about evolution and about changing. Unfortunately, some aspects of Gandhi's life are then taken and presented to represent the whole of Gandhi. I have written on, as a response to some of the criticisms of Gandhi being racist, and I could share that with the participants. But sadly, the story of Ghana as well is a one-sided story of Gandhi's impact in the rest of the continent, apart from Gandhi's influence in the rest of the world. If you read what happened, for instance, in East Africa, if you read in Ngugi and you read A Grain of Wheat, you'll see in A Grain of Wheat, in Ngugi's novel, set in East Africa, set in Kenya, the prisoners are reading Gandhi and are understanding the way in which Gandhi fought against the colonial powers. And in so many ways, what the post-colonial and decolonial critics do not appreciate is that Gandhi was very much in the forefront of the post-colonial and our contemporary decolonial struggles. Some thinkers and philosophers and intellectuals from the South have understood that and have seen how Gandhi has continued, and Gandhian thought continues to play a role in critiquing colonial knowledge, colonial power. And unfortunately, incidents of the statue being removed show that just selected aspects of Gandhi are being used or understood, and the whole of Gandhi is not being seen and appreciated.
Thanks a lot, ma'am, for that nice and very precise answer. Since we do not have any queries as of now, may I request Professor Naveen Sharma to propose a vote of thanks for our speakers today?
Thank you, Vikram, and good afternoon to you all. It's my privilege to propose vote of thanks to two wonderful ladies who spoke about different aspects of Gandhi in two different parts of the world, one in Mauritius and another one in South Africa. In Mauritius, Gandhi, as Dr. Kunjal narrated, that he made a chance visit to Mauritius, and that chance visit had a profound impact on socio-cultural life of Mauritius. And similarly, Gandhi went to Africa in 1893 and came back after 21 years. And the Gandhi that went to Africa and the Gandhi that came back to India are two entirely different persons. So once again, I thank Dr. Vidotma Kunjalji for sharing his thought on Gandhi and his visit to Mauritius and the impact it had on Indo-Mauritian societies. Similarly, I thank Dr. Vedi Govindain for his wonderful talk on Gandhi, and due to his prior engagement in another program, because right now Honorable HRM and his deputy, they are dedicating the newly construction Kendriya Vidyalaya to the people of this area. Our Honorable Vice Chancellor could not attend the program, otherwise he is a very keen, I should say, participant to such kind of program, and he used to speak uh, at least for 5 or 10 minutes. So I thank him in absentia, and I also like to thank Professor Govindain Tripathi, Dr. Vikram Pratap Singh, Dr. Abhishek Bansal, and all those who, right from the day first on 5th August onwards, participants who are participating in each and every lecture. And we hope that we will continue this program uh, and listen some more wonderful talks on second of this on 2nd September. We will have another talk by Professor Douglas Elaine, a well-known Ghandian thinker, professor of philosophy at the University of Maine, USA. So once again, I thank you all.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks, sir.
Ladies and gentlemen, before signing off, let me just end by saying that Mahatma Gandhi used to say that a man is but a product of his thoughts. What he thinks, he becomes. And by listening to our two august speakers today, we realize that whatever Gandhi said was not what he preached, but what he followed. As in Buddhism, we have several such small symbols of Buddhism which tell us a great deal about Buddha. Similarly, if we look and dive deeper into Gandhi's life, then those small things which Gandhi used to do, they teach us a lot about self-reliance and self-sustenance. On that note, I would like to take your leave now and would request and invite you to again join us on 2nd of September for a talk by Professor Douglas Ellen. Thank you for joining us. See you again on 2nd. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Not audible, ma'am. Hello, everybody.